Here we go. It is time for a basic seasonal Hellmode build, and now this build is my take on the what's, whys and hows, so that you can start actually practicing Hellmode on your own and eventually being able to hit that top 300 rankings and start earning red crystals for yourself. And now, even though this video is recorded on my main account, don't worry, you can start using and practicing this build quite early in the game. I will walk you through it, and this build is about the guys you can see peeking from behind my back. Now, this is a Town Archer Hellmode build. Now, in this build, your Town Archers are going to be doing 100% of the damage, so that means your battle results are going to look something like this. And that means we can pretty much rule out every damage dealing hero from this build, and now every hero in this build are either for boosting your Town Archer's damage in some way, or to help you with crowd control. And now crowd control is super important in Hell mode, and you have to be able to control the enemy units as much as possible if you want to reach higher scores. Let's start going through the build, and let's start with the crowd control units, and you can see them on my build over here, and there's also some optional heroes. I will go through them as well. You can swap them out with some of these guys depending on what kind of items you have been able to get and so on. And let's start with the first one, which is the Succubus. And for her we are using the middle promotion, which will allow her to charm the enemies to fight for you. And this will not only stop the enemies from advancing to your castle, but actually make them to attack the other enemies as well, so they will kind of act as a double crowd control unit, if you will. And for items, this hero is also really easy. You just need cooldown items, and the maximum amount, like the lowest amount of cooldown this hero can get is 5 seconds, and this is relatively easy to achieve with just a couple of cooldown lines. Especially the flat cooldown lines are really strong on this hero, but you should be able to achieve at least close to these 5 seconds, if not actually reaching the max level over here, and nothing else is needed for this hero. For the orb, I'm using the Archer speed skill to boost my Town Archer's attack speed a little bit. If you don't have a Succubus on level 10,000 yet, don't worry about the orb. It's not a huge deal, it's just a small minor bonus. And next up we have the Flying Orcs. Now, Flying Orcs will help you with against the flying enemies, crowd controlling the flying enemies, which are actually the scariest part of Hell mode, and they will probably be the thing that will kill you eventually. And now Flying Orcs will help you stun them and slow them down a little bit. We can start up with the Ice promotion, because the Ice promotion has a built-in slow chance for the enemies, so they will help slowing down the flying monsters. And as for items, you will want stun lines for these guys, and stun will help you against air units. Air units can't be knocked back, they can be just stunned and slowed, so stun will be a really strong line on these guys. So try to stack up on stun chance lines, and in addition to that you will want lines like cooldown, +1 summoned unit and attack speed. And the more you have, of course, the better your results will be, but try to start with stacking up with stun chance. And as for orb, I'm just having a Fire Mastery skill over here to boost up the fire damage a little bit. Again, if your flying orcs are not level 10,000, don't worry about the orb, that's not the most important part of here. Just remember using the stun lines on these flying orcs. And then we have Dorothy. Now Dorothy will do to ground monsters what the flying orcs do to flying monsters, so they will be responsible of knocking the ground monsters back. And now for here, you will want mainly knockback lines. In addition to that, you will want cooldown, attack speed, and +1 summoned unit lines. So it's basically the same as the flying orcs, but instead of stun, you want knockback chance lines on this hero. And you can use the poison promotion to make the enemies take more damage from the poison debuff. And again, from the orb, don't worry about the orb if you don't have Dorothy on level 10,000. It's not gonna be boosting her in any way, so that's just an additional thing. I have defense skill over here for a minor extra defense, but that's not important part of the build if you don't have level 10,000 units yet. And now on the second row, things get a little bit tricky. Now we have slingers over here, and slingers are great because they can hit both flying and ground monsters. And you mainly want stun or knockback lines for this guy. Stun is better for air as well, but knockback will also help against ground monsters. And in addition to that, you will want slow, attack speed, cooldown, +1 summoned unit lines. Those will all help on this hero, and especially if you have enough skill points that you can reach this PS node in the summon skill tree over here. This is pretty much crack for Slinger's crowd controlling ability, but if you don't have that many skill points yet, you probably won't get the maximum boost out from this hero. I'm using the physical orb, by the way, to boost the attack speed a little bit. If you don't have a level 10,000 slingers, don't worry about the orb yet. But if you don't have great items for slingers, or if you want to try something else, again, I encourage you to try different setups a little bit so you can see which works for you the best. And the replacement for slingers could be Alice. Now Alice will do the same as Dorothy. So if you want to replace slingers with Alice to try out, just give Alice same kind of items that you gave to Dorothy. So knockback and etc, etc. That's a pretty valid option here if you don't want to use the slingers. And then we have the angels, and now their role is to body block the flying units. So if you use them, set them to target the flying units. And the problem with angels is that they will start getting crushed the further you get into the score of your hell run. And I'm using them here as for my cooldown skill level +1 slave unit, so that's the reason I have them here right now. Options instead of angels could be Hawk Druid or the Giant Ogre. Now Hawk Druid, especially if you have +1 summoned unit items, will, well, boost your castle defense a little bit, but also his summons are immortal, so they don't get crushed no matter how strong the enemies are. So if you're lucky enough to get items with +1 summoned unit and crowd control lines like knockback or stun, that's probably a really good chance for you to try out Druid instead of angels. And also for Giant Ogre, he has a built-in knockback for all the ground monsters, so he doesn't really need any items to work. You can start using him from the really beginning of the game without any items, but if you have some cooldown, that's gonna help him out a little bit more. So these are both valid options instead of angels here if you wanna try out. And again, I wanna encourage you to try and practice with a little bit different layouts and see which works for you the best. And with summoned units, this should be pretty obvious, but I will say it anyway, you will want to summon them every time you can so that they are actually on the field doing their job for as much time as possible during your run. And next up, we have the Ice Wizard, another important, really important crowd control unit. And he's here because his basic attack can freeze the flying monsters, so he will be set to target flying. And also his AoE ability will be able to freeze the ground monsters, and that will be huge for your crowd control. Now, what you want for this hero is cooldown and attack speed. And I have the attack speed orb over here. If you don't have a level 10,000 Ice Wizard yet, don't worry, you can just go with the items only. But cooldown and attack speed items are good for this guy. And then as the final crowd control unit on this build layout over here, we have Mechanic Ram. Now, Mechanic Ram, if you don't have any items, is not going to be any use for you. So in that case, you would want to get Giant Ogre in his place, for example, and Giant Ogre might actually be better than Mechanic Ram in very early game if you are trying to start practicing the hell mode and you really don't have any items, because he will need knockback items and slow attack speed and cooldown lines as well, so that he can be knocking the ground monsters back. He has his normal attack and he also has his bombardment attack you can use to help you with crowd controlling the ground units. And with good items, with good attack speed and knockback, this is a really good hero for crowd control. But if you don't have items, again, like I said, it's not going to be any use for you. So in that case, I would change this one for the Giant Ogre. And with your castable abilities on your Ice Wizard, Mechanic Ram and Giant Ogre, try to aim them so that you can keep the ground monsters as far away on the right side as possible. You don't really want to let them advance more than like a third of the map at max, and you just try to crowd them over there and kill them over there if possible. That's one of the important strategies you want to use your crowd control castable abilities for. And wow, we have crowd control units done. We have only big damage boosting heroes left, so let's go through them really quickly. And the first one we have is the Dark Hunter. Now, Dark Hunter will want cooldown items, and I'm actually missing one here because it's in my other build currently, but cooldown items so that you can cast the haste ability as often as possible. I have the Archer range skill here, Orb. Again, Orbs is not important if you don't have level 10,000 Dark Hunter yet, but the haste ability and cooldown items is what you want for this guy. And the haste is the same as what your Town Archers has as well. So the haste will boost the Town Archers attack speed. And what you want to do with these two is you want to keep rotating between these two, and you want to keep the haste ability up and running as much as possible, because that is an important part of boosting your score big time. So you can start with, for example, casting the Town Archer haste buff, and once it's starting to run out, you will cast the Dark Hunter haste buff, and once that runs out, hopefully you will have your Town Archer haste buff of cooldown again, and you can just recast that and then rinse and repeat. And you can just try to aim or 100% uptime for that highest haste buff if possible, but if that's not possible, then just as much as possible, because that will help you out a lot. And next up we have the Dark Skeleton, and then this hero will also boost your Town Archer's damage by giving them critical chance and critical damage whenever his ability is cast. And for items, you will want cooldown items for this guy as much as possible, because you want to be able to cast these ability as often as possible, because this will boost your Town Archer damage huge time as well. And as orb, I'm using the critical chance to boost the critical chance of my units a little bit. Again, if you don't have level 10,000 skeleton, don't worry about the orb, just get cooldown items on this hero if you can, and that will help you out a lot. And then over here we have the Dark Necromancer and the Pure Wizard. I'm not gonna go through them because it's the same as in every build. And in here we have the Dark Assassin, and for this guy you will want cooldown items and some attack speed if possible. Set him to attack flying monsters so that he will help out a little bit with clearing the flying monsters. And his reason being here is this critical damage debuff to monsters, and they will take more critical damage on the next critical strike, which you will want to use to boost your Town Archer's damage huge time. Again, this is a really important part of this build, and this will help you deal so much more damage with your Town Archers. And just stack up on cooldown and attack speed lines if you can. Attack speed runes as well can help on this guy a little bit. You want to be able to mainly cast this ability as often as possible again, so you can just keep on stacking the debuff. And like the tactic here is to just, like I said, keep the haste buff running. But when you see a huge amount of enemies coming, you will cast all three: Dark Necromancer, Dark Skeleton, and Dark Assassin. And now you cast all of them, and then preferably cast Pure Wizard right after to make them becoming available faster again. This will give your Town Archer such a huge damage boost that you will be able, at least you should be able, to clear the screen entirely with these buffs. And you just kind of have to learn how much you can create, how much monsters you can let on the screen before you have to cast these and be able to still kill all of the monsters. But this is a this is like your trump card. This will kill everything on the screen with your normal hero ability. So this is something you want to keep on practicing. Like casting all three of them will result in huge damage increase momentarily for your Town Archers. Well, that's heroes done. Then what about Town Archers? They should be pretty important part, right? Because they are doing all the damage, and you can equip them with items if you have this skill node activated in the top right corner of this skill tree, and I will talk about skill tree more in a moment. But if you have that, then you can equip them up with S tier items, and if you can, you will want to get them items with percentual damage or percentual fire damage, that's even better, or critical damage. And you can also use attack speed runes over here, or attack speed lines if you don't happen to have items with double of the damage boosting lines. And as for orbs, the physical orb or the critical damage orb is probably gonna, the orb of power, sorry. Orb of power or the critical damage orb is probably gonna be your choice to go if you have Town Archers high leveled enough and you have the skill nodes activated. With the latest update, you can set them to attack the flying monsters as well. And that's your Town Archers basically. And as for leader, we have Solar. Solar is here for boosting the critical chance of fire type units, and we have our Town Archers doing fire damage here, so that will be boosting their critical chance. That's the reason Solar is here. She's not going to be doing any damage. I have her here for cooldown skill level +1 yellow lines. If you don't have those, you can maybe use whatever crowd control unit lines you can get, or damage reduced lines. If you have legendary items, you can use them on this leader, but they're not going to be doing much of a difference. And as for towers, we have the Mirror and the Frozen Tower. Now, Frozen Tower is here to set up to attack flying monsters to slow them down a little bit. Again, this is just part of stacking up crowd control things to help give your Town Archers more time to deal with the enemies before they can reach your castle and kill you. And on the bottom we have Barracks to body block the enemies a little bit. There's not much of a choice that would do difference in here. And here we have the Death Form to make sure you don't run out of MP during your run, and that really shouldn't be an issue. So absolutely there's no need to mirror Worm in Hellmode build like you do in your Waving build most likely, so we can use the mirror for Ice Frozen Tower instead. And as the castle parts, we are going to be using as the base the fire castle to boost our fire type units attack by plus 15%. And again, our town archers are going to be doing fire damage here, so that's going to boost their damage a little bit. As for the top parts, the only really important part when you are starting out in the early game is the shield castle. And this will boost your castle defense a little bit, so it should help you not dying so soon. The other twos I have in here are the frozen and the poison castle, and if you don't have enough skill points, these are not going to be useful. If you have enough skill points, you can use the frozen castle to slow enemies, and you can use the poison castle to give them a poison debuff, but these are not going to be useful for you if you are starting out with the game and really early game. If you can reach this node over here, this will give your frozen castle a chance to slow the enemies, so that's probably the one you will unlock first when you start getting more and more skill points and try to get higher score with your Hellmode build. But you will start out with shield castle, and these can be left out with nothing. They will not be doing any damage whatsoever, and then just take in the frozen castle once you can get that skill point over there. Almost done with the build. We have buildings left, and we have Archer Guild here, obviously to boost our Town Archer damage. This should be an obvious choice by now. Give them as much damage boost as possible. Then we have Spring Water on the other side, and do not skip this building on any build you make. This is probably the best building in the game. And in the middle we have Bar to increase the amount of our human type summon units. Now in this build we have currently Slingers and Angels, so they will get boost from the bar. If you don't have either of those, if you choose to take the Giant Ogre for example and Alice here, you don't have any human type units, then obviously you don't need the bar either. And in that case you can take in the Forge to give you guys a little bit more HP. Not going to be making a huge difference, but in case you do, you can switch up the bar with the Forge. And for the altar, I'm using the one that gives you Town Archer's attack speed for 20 seconds. And now remember, you can only use altar once per run, so you really have to kind of think when you want to use the altar. And I would treat this as a mini power-up. Like when you are starting to struggle a little bit, you can use this instead of using one of the more powerful power-ups you can use during your each run. We will talk more about that in a moment, but this will be like one of your extra power-ups during your run. And that's it for the layout. We have treasures left obviously, and we have the flame bow here. Now this will make our Town Archers do fire damage, so this is kind of the core part of this build, this treasure over here. For other parts we have Power Claw, Sharp Arrow and Mechanic Cure to boost your Town Archer's damage and attack speed. These are pretty self-explanatory. And then we have the Frozen Heart to deal extra damage to frozen monsters. This will help us to clear ground monsters a little bit more easier, and this is also something that you can switch out for something else if you want to try out. If you want to try out ranged defense for example, or if you want to try out the Cursed Heart and see if you have better results with those. But I'm having the best, for my personal feeling is that I am having the best results with the Frozen Heart, so that's why it's the last treasure in my build. And now about the skill tree. Now obviously this is my main account, so you won't be having this many skill points once you start going out with the Hellmode and practicing it, but I will show you this anyway. And I will include a couple of pictures pinned in the comment section down below with different kind of amount of skill points and what kind of skill tree setups you can use with those. And here I want to show the first setup for skill tree you want to start using when you start practicing Hellmode. So for that, let's head up to my secondary account right now. And here we are. Now, if you have 13 skill points or more, that means you are ready to start practicing Hellmode for real and aim for that top 300 rankings. And with this amount, it's recommended that you go down with the lightning tree for a couple of reasons. First of all, there is this stunned monsters take 15% more damage node, which will, again, you should have stun lines on your heroes, as we just went through, will help you deal with the monsters a little bit more easier. And also there are these small 2.5% more damage to flying monster nodes, and these will help you clear the scary flying monsters a little bit more easier. And also this sword node over here, there's one sword node in every skill tree branch, and this will give you 2.5% more damage for your Town Archers as well. So these, if you can reach these, take them, because they will boost your damage, they will help you get a bigger score. And the last reason, really important reason, is this +1 slash, and the assassin debuff is applied one more time buffs, because this will help you apply more debuffs with your Dark Assassin, and it will help you Town Archers deal even more damage, boosting up your score. And two more things I want to say about the skill tree, remember to check the images down in the comment section below, is that if you have enough skill points to reach this Town Archer section over here, you should probably do so, especially if you have any S items for them. And the shortest way to them is through the ice tree. In that case, I would reset the skill tree and go through the ice tree. There's also a couple of useful skill nodes over here that can be used to boost your score, and you can reach these ones and give you Town Archers a huge damage boost if you can. There will be a picture about this in the comment section, like I said. And the second thing is that because our Town Archers are doing all the damage, we don't really have to care about these negative nodes that we usually don't want to take, because they are not affecting your Town Archers in any way. Which means we don't have to travel through the outer circle to the next tree, but we can just skip through these negative nodes over here, and we can reach, for example, the slinger nodes much easier this way. Like I said, this is not a negative impact on your Town Archers in any way, so you can just feel free to take on these nodes to travel through the next trees much more easier than with your waving build. We are almost done, and the last thing is to talk about this freaking abomination we have on the screen right now, which is not my face, but this freaking scoreboard, or whatever you wanna call it. And in Seasonal Hell mode, your unit levels don't matter at all. And instead you level up your units through these points over here in this top bracket over here. This is for your hero levels, this is for your castle level, and this is for your Town Archer levels. And since our Town Archers are doing most of the damage, we don't really need to level up our heroes much. We just want to put 51 points in here so that they can reach their full potential with their abilities, and that's gonna be it. We won't touch this during the run at all. And as for castle HP, this is kind of something you want to feel how much you want to put in here for yourself. You maybe want to put like 250 points in here, or you just want to do like 150 points in here. You just kind of want to try out with how little you can get away with and not die too early. And most of the points you will get will go to your Town Archer levels. So this will be the thing that will boost your Town Archer damage. And you also want to put 1 point in here to earn points 5% faster, so you have more points to spend during your run. And this is a great starting point. Now, if you are able to achieve higher scores, you can try putting more points in here, like 2 or 3, and maybe 1 point in here as well, for bonus points every time you earn points. But these are quite costly in terms of points, so if you are not able to reach huge scores, it's not worth to waste your points in these two over here. Just put 1 point in here initially when you start doing Hell mode. And the lower section is about resistance, and we want to max out this fire resistance over here. We can max out it initially before we even start run if we want. This is because our Town Archers, again, they are doing fire damage, so we want to make sure the enemies will be taking as much fire damage as possible. So we want to decrease the enemy's fire resistance by minus 50%. Now this is important part of the build, you don't want to skip on this. The rest of these resistances, to cold, lightning, physical and poison, these 4 over here, they don't matter, you don't touch them during this run at all. But instead these 4, this stun, slow, knockback and freezing resistance, these are important as well. And you kind of want to give the enemies debuff on their resistances on these crowd control lines, because again, crowd control is super important. But just how many points you want to put in here during your run, it's kind of something you, again, have to try out for yourself. You have to practice how much you want to put in there, what is the optimal thing you want to do, because you need to balance on putting points into these 4 and putting points into your Town Archer level, which will boost their damage. Now if you forget one of them, then you will get crushed, so you will just have to kind of find the balance. But a good starting point, once you start earning points in your run, could be to put like 20 points in your stun resistance, 20 points in your knockback resistance, and maybe like 10 points in your freezing and slow resistance. And you can start with that. Like when you start earning points during your run, you just start leveling them up a little by little, and also keep on leveling your Town Archers from here as well. And once you reach those amounts, the rest of the points, every single point goes to Town Archer level to boost the Town Archer damage. Now, if you have great crowd control items and you are able to reach higher and higher scores, you might want to try putting more points into knockback and stun resistance and so on. So again, like I try and feel what's the best for you, but that's probably the one thing you want to start out with. And this is something you can start your initial run. Just copy this layout and go with it and start spending those points. And remember, these other resistance or elements is useless. Don't put any points in them, and don't put any points in bonus gold. That's wasted points if you want to reach highest score with your Hellmode build.
I know that is the Hellmode build, now go practice please.
And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down in the comment section below. I will also pin some additional information in there as well. Now please let me know what kind of scores can you get with this build and how you feel the build in overall. I would be happy to hear any input on that, and I will see you next time. So thanks again for watching this video. It was a long video, but I hope it helps you out with your Hellmode and lets you start practicing towards that top 300 rankings for your red crystals. So stay safe until next time. Goodbye.